Hi, welcome to the seventh problem-solving session of Understanding Ethnography by Professor Neena Sabnani, the NPTEL course instructor and a professor from IIT Bombay, IDC School of Design. So I am Apeksha Gautam and I am the TA of the course, and so I am here every week to help you with your problems if you have any throughout the course. And yeah, today, now in the seventh problem solving session, we've been discussing a lot in the previous sessions of a lot of very different things about ethnography and ethnographic studies in general. Also, we have been discussing about a lot of different aspects, such as starting from the very beginning about what is ethnography, what is an ethnographic study, what all it entails. Is an ethnographic study the right thing for you to adopt? Uh, Depending upon your research question, what are research questions? How do we frame them? Then what sort of methodology we use and deploy while you are doing an ethnographic study, and then um, what are the major aspects? So those includes that the context and the participants in ethnography form the major chunk of the study. Uh, all of the ethnographic study is majorly about the participants and them being in their context. So we have been done through that, and we have also started talking about how do we collect data when it comes to ethnographic studies, and how do we start off with collecting data before going to the field, what all we should prepare. So first thing was we can either do observations or we can also do interviews. How observations are done, what all aspects to keep in mind, um what all is important when you do an observation, how many different types of observations are there, which you can do, which might be helpful for your study. We have all discussed those in detail. Also, we have till the last session we have also talked about how to conduct an interview, what are interviews, what all should be there in an ethnographic interview. We have discussed that quite a lot in detail. And yeah, so till the last sixth session, problem solving session, we had completed the first 6 weeks of the course. We are just left with two more problem solving sessions after this session, and yeah, we're left with 2 more weeks. So now we'll be starting off with the week 7, and week 7, as you might have gone through it, and you might have at least not gone, but if you've like seen it properly, even the week 8 is here, so I expect that your week 7 should be complete by now. Even if it's not, you can just uh, like go through it quickly, and also um think about how you might just want to actually uh, move through the course, because week 7 is a very important week, because it starts off with what is basically a very important aspect for designers when it comes to an ethnographic study in design. How do we majorly take up things, right? This week should be like the most relevant week to you, because apart from this week, the all other weeks we have talked about had majorly encompassed examples and topics that are like uh, relevant to every sort of discipline. However, visual ethnography will help you and will make you like understand more about how designers do ethnographic studies and what all aspects do they keep in mind. Also, it has a lot to do with filmmakers or maybe storytellers. So, if you are into that, you'll be very interested to go through this. And yeah, so all of these things are there in week 7. Week 7 is a fairly long week. we have a lot of videos, fairly long videos in it, and these videos will actually help you understand very minute aspects of visual ethnography. Also, they will not just visual ethnography but ethnography in general also, because there are a lot of case studies they talk about. There are a lot of examples they take in between, because and they'll also show you a lot of snippets from a lot of um, documentation processes. So basically, we'll come to what all comes in visual ethnography and how do we document them. But the major idea here is that you get a lot of idea how things actually work, because otherwise before all of session all of week 7, we had been just talking about concepts and not actually talking about how things are done practically, right? uh, there were some examples uh, in the previous weeks as well that told us a lot about how things would go practically. But again, this week will eventually tell you like how different and famous ethnographers, anthropologists have actually conducted their own studies, and what all aspects they have kept into consideration while doing those studies. So that aspect is very important for us to see. And before like we start our own study, it becomes very important for us to actually um, cover different aspects. So, and we might just lose out on some things while we are on a first ethnographic study. We might just lose out on a lot of different things. So here, um, this week will ensure that you learn from all of these different examples that the professor discusses, and also the ethnographers also discuss their own findings and their own ways of working. So that is a very interesting thing that I found out. So there are examples of uh, Jay Shankar and Anjali Montera, and there are also examples of McDougall's. So all of these examples and all of these instances will actually help you to understand the depth and also the seriousness with which things have to be done, and also the very interesting part and I think the most important part of all these examples and studies is they tell you that how do these ethnographers who are already very experienced and already very through with what an ethnographic process is, but they every time again in every different study they find new nuances and newer learnings, and they learn from every each and every different work of theirs, and then they implement and they try to implement it in the next ones. So that is very interesting, that even though you have so much experience with doing ethnographic studies and being in the field, but then again there are quite many different things you might not be able to predict or even not be able to assume while you are in the field. And then that is what makes ethnographic study a very what do you say, a very effective and a very nuanced way of doing the research. So in that sense, I would request you to like go through every video of available in the week, and also like very carefully study how different documentation has been done. We might not be able to cover documentation today, but like we might be able to cover somewhat some part of the week 7 today. I am going a bit slow because these aspects are very important to consider and important to uh, understand properly. You should be clear with what we are trying to convey to you, and so if so these all of these weeks try to convey a lot of things in these few number of videos. So I just try to explain things in detail so that you do not just get stuck anywhere, and do not like get stuck with what you think that I don't understand this sort of particular aspect of what they're talking about. It becomes too abstract for me. So here I'm trying to convert those abstract things to some sort of understandable point, And yes, so we will majorly discuss some part of week 7 today, then we'll be discussing some part of week 7, the remaining part of week 7, and some part of week 8 in the next one, and finally we'll be covering the whole of week 8 in the next problem solving session, next to next one. So yeah, we can just start off with what the week 7 entails, and then uh, you may just ask me any questions if you have. uh, right. Okay, so let's come to visual ethnography. Visual ethnography, here, when we talk about it, it starts off with a lot of explanation, and the primary aspect that we'd like to focus on in visual ethnography is how it is a form of ethnography, right? So it's a form in which you pay attention to the visual aspects of the context. Now, visual aspects, what we mean here is whenever you're in the field, you are not just with the participant, you're not just in the context, but you sort of have a look into a lot of artifacts that I have already talked about in the previous session. Um, if you remember, I had talked about artifacts that, like, basically the tangible and intangible things that are present in the field. So, if you remember, I talked about that if you go to somebody's home and try to interview them, you will find a lot of different things that are placed in their homes. So, like in our homes, we have a lot of different sort of displays, or what do we say, even our home items that are important are kept in sort of specific places, and that totally depends on how we want them to keep, how we want to keep them, and in that sense, that literally expresses, and that literally represents who we as persons are, right? So in that sense, when you go to the field, you are there with the participants, you actually see a lot of things that are present in the context. So these visuals, what these can be objects, these can be the landscape, these can be sort of what do we say, a phenomena that you're observing. So these visuals that you are actually seeing, and you're hearing, you're smelling, all of these things are sort of visuals. Now, when we say visuals, it is um, quite acceptable and understandable that it you will understand visuals as something that you just see, and we'll come to the sensorial aspect as well. But again, visuals are not just something that you see. It contains much more of that, and it's something that you experience while you're in the field, right? So experience will contain a lot of different things, not just seeing what you are, what you can, and also uh, the visual aspect of the field needs to be understood and not just seen. So we'll come to all of these factors, but what a visual aspect is actually is, um, we are talking about that right now. So let's just see what the visual ethnography says. Yeah, so the visual ethnography is a form of ethnography in which we pay attention to the visual aspects of a context. As I said, visuals are a lot of different things. So, and treat visuals as a source of knowledge. Now, as I said, you do not just see visuals, but you gain knowledge from them, right? As we already have discussed a lot about this in observation. When we're talking about observation, participant observation, and other things like that, we were saying that these objects, we had also talked about this in oral history, while we talked about how the idea of using objects to learn about the stories of partition have been a very important source of knowledge. So here, treating visuals as a source of knowledge is very important, because then what is the main goal of ethnography, of doing an ethnographic studies? Obviously, like attaining that knowledge which is there present in the context, which cannot be just seen and has to be sort of incorporated into us. You have to feel it, you have to grasp it through your abilities as a researcher. So these visuals are thus a source of knowledge. They give you the knowledge that you want to gain, and then they try to use visual methods to interpret and represent ethnographic knowledge. So interpretation and representation of ethnographic knowledge are two different things. We'll come to these as we go forward. So this is a very heavy definition full of a lot of keywords that we need to keep in mind, but we'll unravel each and every point of this definition as we move forward. And as of now, let's just understand that the way in which visual methods are interpreted means that how you make meaning out of the visual aspect that you're watching that you're watching in the field, right? What meaning you get from the visual. So because there are different researchers in the field, there can be different meanings that different researchers can get from one visual. So all of these things come under interpretation, and when you have gained that knowledge from the interpretation of the visual methods, you represent it. Now you can represent it through different mediums, like you can represent it through writing, through through films, through animations, through um, images, etc. So you can represent whatever you have gained through a lot of different things, and we will see how we do it much later, as we will be done with visual ethnography. So we'll see how we actually express what we have gained from the field. Now, when we talk about visual ethnography, it's also important to see that our understanding and knowledge of our world is deeply rooted in how we experience it through our bodily interactions, particularly through sight or seeing. Now, this comes into account because when we say that it's a visual ethnography and not a sort of a sensory ethnography, here we are majorly focusing on what we see as an individual, right? The idea of sight and of seeing is overpowering the concept of feeling here. So that aspect of watching and seeing is also deeply rooted um, in what we want to see. So there are various ways um, in which we can explain how we understand the world around us and how our knowledge is created, right? So this understanding and knowledge of the world is created in visual ethnography through what we see, right? uh, in observations as well, we can say that this is the major aspect that we are considering. So sort of because that again contains other aspects of sensorial ethnography as well. So we cannot just say that observation is visual ethnography. But yeah, the important aspect here is that in ethnography, it is important that you also pay attention to things that you see, and not just keep your focus on what your participants are saying to you, right? This aspect is very important, and therefore a whole new or a whole different what do we say branch of ethnography comes into picture, which we call as visual ethnography. So basically, when we make meaning, we try to make meaning out of what we see in the field. That constitutes a sort of a visual ethnography context. Now, how do we do visual ethnography? So, we have talked about that visual ethnography is something that we can do, but how to do it? So, in the videos here, so basically, these things are not very rigid. When we say that ethnography is this, visual ethnography is that, it's not that these things have hard lines. You cannot generally put things into clusters or put things into what do we say in closed beakers when we talk about concepts of research, or maybe just anything about research, these things are actually flowy in nature, and one flows into another. So like ethnography flows into visual ethnography flows into ethnography, and all of these things um, uh, do not have specific limitations, do not have specific uh, uh, what do we say uh, specific rigid definitions, because we cannot define things very rigidly when it comes to research. So the idea is that we are all here to just understand things, and not limit things into definitions. So here again, when we say how to do visual ethnography, it's not that we are defining that visual ethnography is done in just two ways. It's just that how we can just in like what all aspects when we think of in visual ethnography can be categorized in more or less in these two specific areas. So one is like researching the visual, and the second is like researching with the visual. Now these words are actually quite very clear uh, when it comes to you know just reading these. You might have got some sense about what is researching the visual and what is researching with the visual, but like let's just see them one by one. So when we talk about researching the visual, uh, we are actually uh, moving towards understanding and learning and unraveling the meanings of what we see in the context or in the environment or in the field, right? So when I talk about making understanding the meaning of certain objects that we see, uh, it's that we are actually trying to put that particular object in the context of the participant's world, right? In that sense, we try to just focus on what the objects we are seeing, right? So that can be, so the again the visual that we are talking about, it can be one object or it can be a whole physical environment. Like for example, if you are in a setting of a community of artists, and you have gone to like understand their way of working, then you are in their in the context of their workspace. That workspace can be a factory, or that can be just what do we say, an open area where the artists are working, right? So you like that physical environment in which you are present. Like for example, if you're there in a factory and uh, you are like interested in the idea of how um, certain art is produced in a factory, like for example posters, or even maps. So these things are there, but how you see everything inside that specific factory, and what all things are present in that factory, what objects are there in the factory, will actually will actually be your visual. First of all, it will be the visual aspect that you are interested in, and next it will that visual, the objects that are present in the factory, the machines, the tools, and finally the finished product that you'll see, the raw material that you'll see there, all of these will be objects that you will be studying. You will find meanings that in those particular objects, in those particular elements of the factory, and through them you will be able to make meaning out of how that factory functions. So like without machines, without understanding and looking at those machines, how will you understand that the artists work with those machines, right? So you won't be able to get a sort of sense or a meaning out of what your participant is saying if you do not understand what elements or objects they're talking about, right? So it is very important that you keep into consideration what elements are present in the physical environment, and the content, form, structure, aesthetic, and making. So basically, these 4 5 aspects of the visual are very important to be considered, because first is content. Basically, content is like let's take an example of the Bhil paintings that Nina ma'am has quite lot talked about it. So when she is there's a lot of discussion of Bhil paintings in this week also, because this forms sort of a very nice and coherent example of how we can explain what a visual is, right? So the paintings that Bhils make are actually the visual aspect, right? You try to make a meaning out of what they are making. So eventually, the paintings that you see, or if you're doing a participant observation, and if like Meena Sabnani ma'am had actually made um, paintings on her own along with the participants, so all those things that she has done there, she's tried to understand the visual aspect, and the try to read and research the visual that is present in her field. So first is learning the content is what in the context of this of these Bhil paintings, the content is what the uh, painting is all about. So basically, if the painting is about a particular god, if like for example, if maybe they're making a painting of Lord Vishnu, right? Or it can be the painting can be about an everyday, uh, what do we say, everyday routine of the painters. It can be that the also the painting can be about a very specific event in the current scenario, or maybe of history. So they, like as we said, the painters generally paint a lot about what is going on in the current context. So if uh, there are elections coming in, they might be painting about a certain the election preparation that is going on in the region, right? So that is the content. So basically, what they are making, what painting is that painting try to convey, what is the painting try to convey comes under the content part here. The form here is actually the basic idea of painting using dots. So Bhil paintings are paintings that are created dot by dot, right? So that is the form in which these paintings are done. So the way in which these paintings are produced is sort of a form. Then is the structure. So why are certain elements in the painting placed at particular location? So like if there are animals depicted in the painting, they are located at the background, or the human structures are located in the front. So what is the structure, how are things depicted in the painting? So this how aspect basically comes under structure. And then the aesthetic, how do these painters ensure that these paintings look beautiful, right? So this aspect comes from the different colors, the various thickness of the paper, and also the the size of the dots that they put in. So all of these things are again the aesthetic part. And the making, now the making part, we'll come to this a bit more in detail later, but the point was that in the making aspect here is that every dot in the Bhil painting sort of represents an ancestor. And this idea of Bhils and why they paint and the process they go through is very sacred. So the procedure of making those paintings, that is the making part of these paintings, has also got some meaning attached to it, and that meaning is very very important to know, because that will basically tell you how your participants are thinking when they are making their paintings, right? And that is an important aspect to understand what type of people they are. Why do they put certain, like, why do they have a lot of emphasis on the ancestorial part and the ritual and the sacredity of the paintings, sacredness of the paintings, right? So all of these things are very important to know. So these five aspects, the content, form, structure, aesthetic, and making, are very important to understand when we are actually studying the visual. We have to, in detail, focus on all these five aspects so that we are able to understand the visual, right? Next, so what can be the examples of the visuals that we see? These can be photographs, photo albums, newspaper clippings, paintings, embroidery, patterns on clothes, the architecture and the decor of the houses, etc. So do you see that how many different aspects you can actually uh, constitute as visuals, and we are talking about being in the field, and uh, when we would want to record a visual. So these things, you can see, are very diverse. You can, like, find every uh, each of them, like each of these particular visuals in all sorts of contexts that you visit. So, and this tells you that even something as trivial as patterns on clothes and as trivial as the decor of the houses will actually tell you many stories that you might be interested in. And all of these will tell you a lot of the context and about your participants in much more detail. So the this is the job of the ethnographic researcher or the visual ethnographer, that you are there in the field, and then you, if you are interested into the visual aspect, and obviously you have to have to consider certain aspects of visual, what do we say, uh, of the visual part into your ethnography, even if you do not want to, sort of go deep into it, because even if you're just majorly interested about your participants' experiences of something, even then these visuals will have an impact on the experiences of your participants, and then these are important to consider also. Now, yeah, when we say all of these are visuals, we also understand that why is it important to read research about them, is because these reveal the underlying beliefs, ideas, and even histories of a community. So, as I was just saying, why do we want to consider all of these things in the first place? Is that these objects, these visuals, these environments of the participants have a lot of influence on your participants. It will eventually sort of shape the beliefs of the participants. The ideas that they'll have will have some sort of connection with these visuals. And even when we were, like, talking about the example of the oral historians, they had also put a lot of emphasis into understanding the visual aspect of the field in order to unravel the meaning why certain things are in a certain way in the field, right? Why they are placed at a certain position. So all of these have a very sort of hidden meanings that you'd want to know about, right? And finally, these visuals may be tangible, such as the covered story boxes, or intangible, such as visuals on film or digital media. Now, the paintings, like the wheel paintings, the covered story boxes, these things you can actually touch, and you can actually, uh, uh, feel, and you can uh, make sort of meaning out of why they are made with certain material, why they are actually painted in such a manner, what does the aesthetic value of these tangible things convey. All of these things can be done on these things that you can touch, like the story boxes and the paintings, etc., even sculptures and things like that. But the intangible things, like something that you would record, these things, and also like photographs, and things that you can actually not touch, sort of in some sense, that are digital, these intangible things will also be sort of the visual that you're interested in. So like if you now today go into the field, and you just ask about your participants about something, and they just are excited enough to show you pictures of something that they're talking about on their phones. So that those are also visuals that you're interested in. You'll be uh, trying to understand why they're showing you particular photographs on their phones, and what those photographs mean to your participants, and what do they depict, what relation do they have with the participants. So all of these things will again also be visuals, but those will be intangible parts. Now, yeah, coming to that, we will actually sort of uh, see a lot of things about the visual, and communicating what we have learned from the visual. So we will also do that. Now the important aspect that we come on to is that researchers treat visual objects as the voices and expressions of the participants, and construct knowledge based on what the visuals express. So like the examples of oral historians, researchers in general also treat visual objects as something that conveys meaning which the participants are not conveying through their words. So these things also hold a lot of meaning, as I said. These can also narrate very different stories that you might be interested in with respect to the context that you're going to. So these can be also treated as voices and expressions of their participants, and construct knowledge based on what the visuals express. So once your participants are talking about the visuals, and you are actually seeing that this particular part of the field has some meaning, you try to convey the whole story that you would want to through the lens of that visual. You will be interested to you know get that visual into the center stage, and then convey your story through that visual, because obviously that particular element or that particular object has some meaning. uh, yeah, the content, form, structure, aesthetic, and making of visuals is again the important parts, as I've already discussed. uh, but it is by analyzing these that we arrive at meaning and ethnographic knowledge. So the five aspects that I was majorly talking about: the content, form, structure, aesthetic, and making. Of the making is actually the process through which the visuals are made. It is very important to analyze these, because as I already said, these five major ideas of the visual will tell you everything about it, and then you can derive the meaning from of what these five things convey to you about the visual, and it again then forms the basis of the knowledge that you construct from the field. But when we talk about researching with the visual, then this is something very, very different from what we have discussed till now. Now, what happens is, when you see something in the field, then you are actually, just looking at it, right? But you will not be able to document something that you just look at. So what do? We record things. like we had also talked about recording the context and recording uh, field, recording the observations basically in the field. As you might as you might remember from a few weeks back, um, problem solving session. So we were talking about recording the observation and in what various ways we can record the observation. So that is what comes under researching with the visual. So it generally talks about using of visual media and devices to record, interpret and represent what we have learned. Okay? And here when we say that visual media is and devices are used to record, then the concept of the visual shifts from the actual objects that we see in the context to the devices that we use, right? So yeah, and the idea of visual like suddenly jumps from what is present in the context to what you take to the context. Do you understand the difference here? And when we say that these visual media and the devices are there to record, we generally record them so that we can just look at them again and again later. And while we're analyzing what we have actually seen in the field, what we have learned from the field, it helps us give more detailing and more more filtered nuances and more, I would say, precise nuances to uh, your knowledge that you're constructing from the visual that you have seen. So it is also sort of you can also say it as using the visual to record the visual, right? So this aspect is called researching with the visual, but again, the ways in which you can record can be like multiple. They can be a lot, and that can depend on how basic. That can depend on various different factors. Like one, how comfortable your participants are with a particular device or media. Secondly, it can be what will be the best ways in which you'll be able to gather and sort of grasp information from your context through like which device, which method to deploy. So these things are there, and like for like practicality, you will be actually using either drawings. You can be taking photographs in the field, or maybe you can filming the whole uh, environment to actually record what you are actually seeing in the field, and then uh, this represent the words of the participants, of course, because whatever you see in the field is very important for the context that you want to study again. And this is, and these like the drawing, photographs and filming are actually the ways in which you will be um, sort of uh, documenting it. And finally, making a film or a photo essay or an illustrated book that represents observations and analysis can be other ways in which you can represent what you have recorded from the field. Now, as I said, there are two aspects of this. First is recording. From uh, you go to the field and then you start capturing stuff from your device, whatever your device is, or maybe through hand by in case of drawings, and then you interpret them. Like once you're done with recording, then you interpret what meanings all of these things convey. This is the analysis part where you are actually trying to sort of identify and uh, recognize major and the broad areas of interest that you'd want to be focusing on in your study. And finally, when you're done with the interpretation part, you're done analyzing what all you'd want to convey to the world. then you sort of represent it through the ways that you're most comfortable with and you think will be the most effective. So sometimes people make a film because they think that when people will watch a film about a certain concept, they will be like sort of more moved than the other ways of representation. Also, some people would prefer to just sort of make a photo essay out of study, because then they are not majorly focused on the procedure on or the the making part of the visuals, but they are majorly focused on the form, the structure, the content of the aesthetic of the uh, visual, and sort of how a visual appears. And finally, if it can also be an illustrated book when you actually want to explain a lot about what you are showing to your readers. So all of these the representation aspects are also important when we consider about how do we research about the visual as well. But there's one very important part to understand here, is that a visual is a repository of meaning and not simply an evidence supporting our other observations, right? So when we say that when we say that we are actually uh, researching the visual or researching with the visual, it is very important to understand that point one, that the visual you're actually looking, like you're looking at something that has meaning into it. You are not just uh, there to describe what is it, but you are there to understand how the object is contextualized in that particular situation or because of the participants. And secondly, you have to understand that these things are not there to just support what you're saying in your study. They are not sort of evidences that will help you make certain points in your study, but there are ways through which you tell your study. Understand the difference here. So then what we say is that basically the visual is actually your main center of study and not a way to carry your study forward, right? So that is what this point means. And yeah, so if you have like moved through the week 7, you might have come across a very detailed description about this film called Sacha. It's basically Sacha the Loom. It's basically a film by uh, Anjali Montero and Jai Shankar. So here they actually talk about um, the main crux of the discussion. That's a huge discussion, but I'll be talking about the main crux here. It's a very enlightening sort of conversation that is there. So I would request you to please go through it. But the major crux that and the particular line that I really liked in the conversation was that the researcher as the third possibility of being neither a spokesman or an observer, but being a participant in our community as an artist. So this particular line is said, and this actually brings about a lot of you know um sort of identity to the researcher. It says that the researcher doesn't have to be a spokesperson of the community, neither it has to be the observer of the community when we are talking about like what should be the role of a researcher, but it has to be a third possibility, which is that it should be a participant in the community in which they are talking about. And the artist here is not the participant but the researcher. So yeah, for example here uh, the ethnographer is basically a filmmaker, so they will call themselves as an artist. And when you sort of document things, you become an artist in that sense. You have your own elements in which you put them into sequence into a manner that you sort of helps you convey a story. So the the placement of the researcher is very beautiful here, because it actually tells you that you are neither uh, a person who will be defending your participants, and also you'll not be someone who will be just a distant observer, or maybe like not talking about some any about anything in detail, but you are actually a participant of the whole study, and you act as somebody from that community who is trying to address issues, or maybe just trying to spread knowledge about a particular um, idea or context. So this there's actually a lot of discussion about the film, uh, and how films are actually a sort of the visual. When we're talking about researching with the visual, then we say that films are a very you know one of the very most famous ways in which you can represent your knowledge that you've gained in the field. So these are then termed as visual devices. And David McDougall says that films are structured works that manifest within themselves the analysis that justifies such a presentation. So it says that a film is a wholesome thing. It's not that uh, it's an entity on its own. He says that it's an entity on its own that can actually, you know, convey a message, and also sort of defends its idea of why does it sort of conveys a message in a particular manner. So these are therefore structured works, and when we say structured, it definitely means that it takes a lot of procedures and processes to actually bring about these films. And then uh, the films are actually something that uh, you know are whole entities with the analysis of of certain idea of what the film is trying to convey. The analysis is also inside it. So it talks a lot about how films can actually be understood, and he says that since being an anthropologist, and since he is himself an anthropologist, and therefore he says that um, the films that uh, filmmakers create, or maybe researchers want to create, would be quite similar to what anthropologists' writings are. So these writings are therefore sort of works of art. They contain in themselves a lot of information, like a lot of knowledge, and they are, arranged in a particular sequence, in a particular order, in a particular way that will actually allow the readers to go in a flow while they are reading. And therefore he sort of puts that analogy to films, and says that the process of making a film is also sort of writing, in which you are carefully putting the elements of those things into a particular order, into a particular sequence, and then you are making sure that the story is conveyed in a manner that is very interesting, and that is very uh, motivating, and sort of influencing your viewers and readers. Again, talking about a lot in detail, they come to footage, and when it sort of talks about the technical details, it tells that the footage is sort of very one, very particular, what do we call, element in the filmmaking process, which various footages come together to make a film. So it is that raw material that comes out of the camera, just that you move the camera anywhere, and what comes next will be a film. So sorry, a footage. So but then a footage in itself has no meaning if it does not gets put into a specific context, right, into a specific film. So a lot of different footages will be have to uh, arranged in a sequence, and we have to put in specific order so that they can then be seen and interpreted as a film, and that film can then convey the meaning that it wants to through the series of footages, right? And therefore McDougall again uh, sort of compares footages with the elements of writings that are field notes. So when you are actually producing a writing in the field, then you make field notes of the instant, happenings that are there in the field, and those can be sort of uh, compared with what footages do, and because these are again instantaneous elements that you just capture when you're in the field. So like field notes are to writings, therefore footages are to films. uh, yeah. Now we also say that the idea of visuals has got nothing to do if the participants do not explain how certain visuals are important to them. So, if, for example, you are in your participant space and you just ask that why is this particular sort of like when we're talking about the concept of a factory, the context of a factory basically. So, when we're talking about that, we actually when we are actually in the field, when we are in the factory, we might just go and like observe something someday, and for example, if we go and ask our participants who are actually the factory workers that why does this machine uh, placed at that particular location in the factory, and then they might not know the reason for that particular placement, and therefore they might not be able to communicate why that particular machine is placed at that point or that location in the factory, and therefore then there is this no reason, or there this no context in which you can actually understand that particular the role of that particular machine in that location, right? So the participants have to those have to be those elements that can actually tell you the context and the meaning of why certain things are yeah, or like certain visuals hold certain meaning in the context. So researching the visual and researching with the visual are not mutually exclusive paths, they flow into each other. And again, when we talk about with the participants, the idea of researching about a particular visual and also researching through a particular visual, these are not at all mutually exclusive uh, points. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Devashish.
Yes, ma'am. Hi. So, because I have another class, so due to that, 1 hour late, my strength of material class is going on, so due to that delay, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah. Have you been Have you been through like the week 7 of the course though?
Ma'am, starting nearly up to 4 week, I did all these things. Then after I leave it, ma'am, so due to the other courses. But I
Okay.
really interested in the ethnography. If I want to know all these things, so due to that only, sir, I pursue it.
Okay. Um, okay, okay. I did get you. Um, so yeah, till week 4, like, did you face any issues in understanding any uh, point or any concept?
No, ma'am, no. Those are basically easy one to understand the people and all thing on the quiz.
Right, right. So okay, cool. If you have any doubts with it, just let me know whenever. And right now, actually, I was discussing about week 7, and we had actually moved from some idea of ethnography to visual ethnography. And I was discussing that what are actually visuals. So, when we are talking about visuals, we see that when you're in the field, like when you're doing an ethnographic study and you are in the field, along with participants in the field, you see a lot of many different things. So that can be like some, uh, you know, items that are present in their home. Those can be, if you're in their workplace, if you're not in their home and if you're in the workplace, that then you those can be machines that are there, and sort of those can be tools, if we talk about things. And also, if we talk about painters, there can be paints, there can be brushes and papers and everything like that, the canvas. So these things are actually the visuals. So these things, sort of called the visuals, also have a lot of meaning when they are present in the field. And right now I was just discussing that a visual, like for example a paintbrush, or maybe a painting that uh, the your participant is creating, has meaning only when the participants describe that meaning to uh, the researcher. And also, if that particular visual or the element, like for example the paintbrush, the colors and all that, uh, if you if you do not if you are not able to get the participants talk about it and understand the meaning of them, uh, then those things do not constitute as something that can produce meaning to you. So you have to like sort of understand each and every aspect of why they use a particular brush, why they use this colors and not any other colors, why they're using acrylic paints, not watercolors or any sort of different paints as well. So those things are again something that are important for your study and will help you understand why certain visuals are present in the context of your participants, right? So, yeah, I'll just share the screen with you right now so that I can show you the presentation as well. You can see the screen, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, I'll just quickly tell you what all I was just covering in this lecture. So, we had started with visual ethnography, what visual ethnography is, and it was. It says that it is a uh, form of ethnography in which we pay attention to the visual aspects, right? So, if you are there in the field, for example, like there were examples of carved storytellers in the in the course. So that basically, when you look at the cover, that is the visual that you are actually seeing. Then you see that the space in which your participants live. So covered storytellers live in some huts which are not very like well off, and they have to like sort of make cards. Sometimes they do it because they enjoy it. Sometimes they do it for a living. So then these cards will actually have a very different meaning to the different storytellers, right? So we were discussing that, and how these visuals are actually uh, different for different people when they see it. So that we were discussing, and then there are two ways of doing visual ethnography. Um, one is researching the visual, and second is researching with the visual. So when we talk about researching the visual, we are very interested into understanding like um, what covered is, what covered actually is, right? So covered is that wooden sort of box and block which sort of is painted, on which the painting is done, right? So when we are talking about researching the visual, we majorly talk about these five aspects: the content, the form, the structure, the aesthetic, and the making. So, the content here, when we talk about the cover, is what is painted on the cover. So, sometimes what is painted can be, that can be a folk tale, or it can be a Hindu mythology tale. Like for example, there can be instances of Ramayana painted over the cover. And next is the form. So why is the cover in a particular shape? Why do they make it in that particular shape, right? That is the form. Then what is the structure? So why did the painters, so they are painting the cover, right? So why did they paint it in a why did they painted Ram very distant to uh, Ravan? That can be one aspect. And why, like, why are there trees painted on the cover? Why are there rivers painted on the cover? So all of these are forms of structure. It tells you why certain elements in the cover are actually placed in certain positions, right? And finally is the aesthetic, that some that to make the cover look more beautiful, they might be using different colors for different things, and they might be painting the cover base as differently, and then using different colors of paints, or different techniques to produce some nice textures on the cover also, so that it looks appealing, and it conveys the meaning of what needs to be conveyed through that cover. And the whole process of producing and painting a cover is the making process, right? So all these five things are actually very important when we are researching the cover. So did you get it till here? Hello? Hello, Devashish?
Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, now you're audible.
Yes, ma'am, clear.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So just let me know if I'm going too fast, or if you want me to increase the pace or whatever, right?
Sure, ma'am, sure.
Okay. So, yeah, researching the visual includes like learning everything about what is there in the visual. Like for example, the covered story boxes is the visual what we are talking about here. And also these things can be tangible or intangible. Tangible is something that we can touch. So these covered story boxes is something that we can touch, but sometimes the visual is something that we cannot touch. Like when we say if there was this covered story boxes are actually eventually made into a film, and there is this film that actually tells the whole story about the covered storytellers, how their lives are, how they actually work, what all do they do when they paint the boxes, then how do they you know move around the villages to explain that story to different people. How do they use this particular covered story boxes? So that particular film is not used as something that you cannot touch, but that also is sort of a visual that helps you understand the context and the a lot about your participants and about the environment in which they live in. So that is one, and the second one was researching with the visual. Now, when you are yeah, when you are actually using a particular, uh, please say something. Yeah, yeah. Please speak, Devashish. And you can speak in between. Yeah.
Ma'am, actually, is it so? The visual means is there the physical significant? Is there not significant means the visual existence? Is there any visual?
You're talking about the tangible part, right? Hello. Yeah, Devashish, can you just clarify if you're talking about the tangible part of
Yes, ma'am. Tangible and intangible. So you talk about the intangible means not touched part means we cannot touch. So the visual means is the physical existence is there or is it imaginary also? Means you talk about the film.
right? So, visual can be anything. So there can be this physical existence, right? uh, the covered story boxes will have that physical existence. They will be there so that you can touch and see them. Like also in the examples of bhil paintings, you can go and see the paintings yourself and actually see how there is the different texture in the painting and other things like that. But when it's a film, then you cannot say that it has a physical existence. It is there. The film can be about something that has physical existence, but not the film itself doesn't have its physical existence, right? So that is what you're talking about here. Yeah, when we like move on to researching with the visual, it will be a bit clearer to you. But yeah, did I answer the question right?
Yes, ma'am. Sure, understand.
Okay, I'll just tell you how this like films and movies and also different things work. So, yeah, when we go to researching with the visual, right? Uh, Now, here the visual, like for example, a film is something that we are talking about. It says that you are actually recording something from the field. Now, as we were talking about the coward storyteller, so there the researchers had actually taken a lot of cameras with them, a lot of sound recording items with them, a lot of equipments, so that they can record everything that is happening in the field. So these visual media and devices that that are there to record, interpret, and represent what we learn is the visual that we are talking about. Now, the recording, interpreting, and representing parts of this line are basically very important to consider. So when we take a lot of equipments like a camera, like camcorder, or maybe like audio recording device, or anything like that, then we are there to just record what is happening in the field, right? We will be making videos, we will be clicking pictures, we might also be making drawings through hands, and these things will actually help you to sort of record everything, like make uh, and make a note of everything that was present in the field, right? But when you are interpreting it, so what recording will help you, it will help you that you remember everything what all happened in the field. So you don't have to just rely on your memory that okay, the participant said that to me, or uh, there was this thing present in the field. So for that reason, you click pictures, you make videos, you talk to participants and all of that. You record the voices of your participants. So for that purpose, so that you don't forget what all happened, you record. But when you're done recording and you go home and you start analyzing what all happened in the field, then you are actually interpreting it there. In the interpreting part, you are trying to make meaning out of what all happened in the field. So, like for example, the coward storytellers were actually, making cowards not because they wanted to like, make money out of it, but they wanted to, keep that tradition alive of making cowards, so that the tradition that their ancestors had followed while going to one village to another, so that they can, tell some stories, the folk tales. Therefore, these things that you understand while analyzing what all happened in the field is the interpretation part. And finally, the film that is created by the researchers, that they have actually, put forth for the world to see, that this is what coward storytellers say and what they want. So you watch the film and then you understand that, oh, so this is what coward story that this is who coward storytellers are, and then what are their concerns, what do they want in life, and what is, you know what is their art, why do they practice their art, and all of that. So these things are very sort of important for you to understand why we record, why we interpret, and why we represent the visuals. And all of these things are done through the visuals. Like, you record the visual, you interpret and try to get meanings from the visuals that you see, and then you represent your learnings from through a visual, which can be a film here, right? So, yeah, the visual here can be drawings. You can be in the field making drawings through your hands. You can be clicking pictures, or you can be making videos. So that will help you represent the worlds of the participants, right? And once you're done with it, and you finally have sort of understood what your participants want, and what you would want to communicate through your research, then you can make a film, you can maybe make a photo essay, you can maybe make an illustrated book. And that totally depends on how you would want to convey what you have learned from the field, right? So if you're making a film, like in the next coming sessions that you will be studying, will eventually cover a lot of films. You will see a lot of um, snippets from films that were created by ethnographers. So in that, you will see how they have actually used the film as a medium to explain, to communicate what they want to the audience. Or they can be using a photo essay, in which all the images that they have clicked in the field, they will be using that to express or explain what all they have seen in the field. And also, if they'd want to sort of explain everything through text, then they would be using some pictures and then writing a lot about what all these pictures mean and all of that. So that is done in an illustrated book. So yeah, as of now, when we are talking about films, here we just said that when we make films, it's a whole process which makes it a very what do we say, a whole entity. So whenever we watch a film, like you might have watched some films in the course, as they tell you. So in those films you will see that uh, one, they will be showing you how different things are there in the, or there, what is the environment in which the ethnographers are going. And then they will have some pictures of the participants. Then they will have some videos of how their participants are working. So like for example, if the film is about the painters, how they will show the process how they are painting. And then they will also have some snippets in which the researcher is talking to the painters. So all of these are included in a film. And David McDougall is an anthropologist. Is a very famous anthropologist. So he says that what, like, anthropologists writings is analogous to films. Analogous is sort of like what films are is actually very similar to something what anthropologic writings are. And when we say these writings, we mean that like anthropology, if you know, will these writings will contain a lot of description about what is there, what is present in the field, right? So these films will actually be another sort of way in which you can express what your field look like, right? So he compares these writings to films, and then he tells what a footage is. So whatever you like uh, click or maybe record through your camera, every single video is a footage. So, but you cannot just say that that particular footage you will be using in the final film that you are making. So, there's a proper sequence of footages that you will use in a film, right? So it's like of a building block of a film. And then he compares that since the footage is a building block of a film, similarly field notes are building blocks of the writings, right? So field notes are something that you take in the field while you are interacting with the participant. What you do is you just note down everything, like you note down how like for example, if you are in somebody's home, you tell that this was placed at this point or in the house. The participant felt nervous while talking to me. Then like when you have asked a certain question and they would have replied, you would just note down that in keywords so that you remember. So these field notes are actually descriptions again of what you see, what you have felt in the field, and all of that. So it says these footage are also something which is very raw and is just one video of the uh, study that you're doing, right? Are you getting it as of now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Clear.
Okay, okay. So now, what researchers suggest is that you should make these visuals. So making visuals is what, making these videos, photos, or maybe drawings. You should be doing it with the participants. This is because once you are making these visuals, it is important that you simultaneously know what these visuals mean, right? So the participants will help you to understand what these visuals actually mean. And when we're talking about researching the visual, that is when we are focusing on what is there, what you can see in the field, and how you're recording the field, that is researching with the visuals, these are not mutually exclusive paths, they flow into each other. So what does this mean is that you will be using, you know, video to record what you see in the field. So both of these aspects are actually covered in this example. And it's not that when you are focusing on just what you see in the field, then you're not focusing on how are you recording, because basically if you're using a camera, you are um, focusing on uh, you know uh, like taking pictures from the field. So that is again, the both of these things, researching the visual and researching with the visual, are actually coming together here. So these are not two different things, but these actually work together. That is what we mean to say. Now there is this one uh, you know UK based filmmaker uh, and researcher, Kathy Greenhalgh. She talks a lot about cinematography in the video that we'll go through in the week 7. So she says that she also actually first tried to study what cinematography is, and the people who are in the field of cinematography, how do they perceive it, right? So she tries to sort of explain what cinematography is, and then she says that it is essentially the process of manifesting camera movement, compositional framing and lighting on a film carried out by the cinematographer or director of photography. So this is sort of a technical definition in which he talks about that cinematography is just the movement of the camera, and how the camera should move. It should keep into consideration the frame in which you are actually interested in. So, like if the actors are standing here, your camera should not be focusing on somewhere else. They should be focusing on the actors. And how is the lighting? So you should be able to actually see properly the actors and whatever is present on the stage. So, cinematography actually is a process in which you take into consideration all of these aspects. And then she tries to identify the differences in perception of cinematography as practice, process, and procedure within the crew on a film. Now, as I said, because she wanted to study about how cinematography is perceived by the various people who are employed in this profession. So she says that there are different perceptions. So these perceptions are basically of three kinds. First is how they see cinematography as a practice, how they see it as a process, and how they see it as a procedure. So uh, she actually explains and tries to understand by talking to different people in the crew, and she sort of takes interviews of them and understands that everybody, like in cinema, everybody has their own language. So it's not the normal language that we're talking in. They do not use the same language. So they have specific technical terms for everything, right? So a camera that is moving, they call it. They won't call it as a moving camera or a a sort of transport that is taking the camera. They call it a dolly, right? So there are certain, every profession has their own terminology. So she says that the cinematography also has their own terminology, and everybody talks about the cinematography in that particular terminology. So yeah, her study basically involved a lot of things. Will not go into detail. We'll just see why was she so uh, you know very interested to learn about the cinematography as a whole. So she focused on observing filming and filming sets. So she would go and observe how people are making films. She would go into different sets, that why the particular film set is decorated in a certain way, right? Then she would interview cinematographers and students. So cinematographers and their students will have very different perspectives on what cinematography is. So she would go and interview them. She would then visit equipment manufacturers. Now equipment manufacturers have a very different side of the story when they are talking about how cinematography works. Viewing archives. Archives are actually past documents or past work that has been done. So she would go and, read a lot about cinematography and how, different people have something to say about it, right? And photographing filming activities. So as she would go and observe that, okay, this is a set and this looks beautiful and why they have decorated it in a certain way, right? She would go and click pictures of it. So that is again, and collecting information shared on set such as storyboards, mood boards, lighting diagrams, continuity sheets, list of equipments, etc. So what all of this is, she would like, um try to capture everything that was present. So, like people who are making films are actually circulating storyboards and mood boards and lighting diagrams. Lighting diagrams basically so that they can instruct the light experts to put lights in a certain at certain angles so that the lighting is perfect, and continuity sheets. So uh, and the list of equipment. So all of these are technical paperwork that is there in the set, and she would also try to, make meaning out of them. And finally, she would also note conversations. Now, it's that like the director will be talking to their assistant and telling them to do something. So she would also note that what they are saying. Uh, yeah, but researching the cinematography requires a lot of things, right? Um, I'm just telling you all of this because this will eventually help you to understand that doing an ethnographic study on a topic that is cinematography also includes a lot of things. So this will help you sort of identify that what all aspects you need to keep in mind when you are doing an ethnographic study on something, right? So, researching cinematography would include a prior understanding of the subject. So, it's generally advised that wherever you're doing a particular ethnographic study, you should be sort of uh, have some understanding of the subject, right? Of what you're doing the research on. It's not that you can, like, for example, I have no idea how medical studies are done. I cannot just go and do a medical ethnographic study because I am not, you know, through with what words they will use in the study. I have no context about that. I have no idea what those words would actually mean. So, therefore, it is very important to have a prior understanding of the subject. Then you should be asking the most basic questions. So, ethnography is not about asking people, okay, what do you think about elections, like elections 2024, or what do you think about, NASA? Because these things are not generally what an ethnographic study is done about, right? If you're going to a person in an ethnographic study, you will be majorly interested to know how they work, what routine they follow, um, what is the, underlying meaning of their of the product they are producing. Like for example, wheel paintings. So all of that. So you should be starting off with very basic questions like, what do you do in a day? So that will help you understand your participants very well. Then observing participants and work is very important because sometimes the participants might not tell you upfront in interviews, they will be doing it in their work. And if you're interested to know how they work, then you should be observing them and making notes of what they are doing while they're working. Then listening to participants describe their work. Also, it's very important because sometimes what happens, as I have said in a few problem solving sessions before as well, that in observations, while you're observing your participants, you might not be able to understand why they're doing something in a certain way. So then you have to ask the participant that why did you do things in a certain way. So like for example, I was giving this example right now that in bhil paintings that they were making, there is this specific way in which they make bhil paintings, and that is putting dots in the paintings. They make the whole painting by putting dots next to each other, right? So while you're doing or you're looking at the wheels making those paintings, you will not be able to know what those dots mean and why do they make the whole painting out of a dot when they can actually make strokes. So then when the researcher asked the uh, painters about why do they make dots in their paintings, so they said that every dot in their painting represented their ancestor, and that ancestor is given sort of a homage when a painting is made. So all of this process is very sacred to bheels. Not everyone can make bheel paintings in their community because it is a very sacred process. It is a sort of a way in which they worship their ancestors. So if you do not talk to participants about uh, what the paintings mean, then you would not know. So listening to participants describe their work is very, very important. And then observing different ways in which in differences in ways of working. So you can see that many different painters will be making their paintings very differently. Some might start making with humans, some might start painting the uh, nature or the landscape first. So there are very different ways in which participants work, and then noting communication among participants. Now, it's very important because when we are informal, we are in our best selves. We are in our most authentic selves, right? When the researcher will be talking to participants, they might be making some, you know, words. They might be sort of uh, what do I say? They might be sort of doing that performativity thing in themselves, like when you are actually conversing with somebody in a formal manner, then you are not someone who you actually are. Then you are actually representing yourself in front of that person, and therefore you're not your real yourself. So it is important that you note the communication among participants so that you see that how they behave informally with other people, and the accruing coming as a direct result of knowledge. So the accruing of knowledge is important because all of this, so whatever you've done, whatever you've observed all above, will give you some knowledge which you have not created but you have um, understood through the process of observing and interacting, right? So this accruing happens, and the visibility and tangibility of knowledge is also have to be understood. So not every knowledge that you will um, get from the field will be visible. So sometimes like the knowledge about what paintings they are making is visible and it's tangible, you can see it and touch it. But like why do they make paintings in a certain manner is not a tangible knowledge. You have to understand, you have to make meaning out of it, you have to uh, explore that yourself. And that knowledge is not visible, you will not be able to see it, but you can only ask your participants to explain it, right? uh, is everything going all good for you, Debashish?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, right, so we will move forward. with the visualization. We'll cover a few more things, and we will just finish off then. So, visualization is one aspect that is very important when we talk about visual ethnography. So, visualization is a process by which the cinematographer works with the director and production design or art direction team to make a film, where the ideas come from the visual influences are, but more importantly, how these ideas are communicated. Uh, but the process here of visualization is sort of explained in a very, what do we say, in a very technical manner, because visualization here is explained through the lens of cinematography, right? So it tells that it's a it's a work of the cinematographer with the director and the production design team and things like that. But the basic idea is that the ideas come from what the visual influences are, and these are how these are communicated. So first thing in visualization is what do you want to communicate, and second is how do you want to communicate it, right? So when we say a particular thing, like when you would want to uh, you know communicate the life of Bhil painters, you say that you are actually making the audience visualize the life of the Bhil painters. And how you are doing it? You are doing it through making a film out of it, right? Or you can be doing it by writing a book. So that is two very different things in which you can make the audience visualize what the lives of the Bhil painters are, right? Um, yeah, so there's so basically visual evidence of various acts and events. So what all should be there in a visualization? One is there should be a visual evidence of various acts and events. So visual evidence here means that if you are actually uh, you know learning about the Bhil painters, then you should actually have some pictures in which they're actually painting, so that you can explain that okay, they paint in a certain manner, they work from this time to this time. Then if you say that they are painting in open spaces, then you should show pictures that okay, they are painting in open spaces. If you say that they paint in closed settings together, then you show that through your pictures, obviously, that they are painting in a closed space with a lot of people sitting together and painting, right? Or if you say that many painters are working on one painting, then that is also you explain through um, pictures. But all of these are types of visual evidences, and these visual evidences are needed because so that you explain your idea, what you want to convey well, right? And participants' verbal descriptions of their acts can be also included. Um, Verbal descriptions basically that if the participants are sort of working with their footwear kept aside, because they consider the paintings as sacred, right? So they remove their slippers out and then work. So you say that okay, they actually work in that sense. And what do? You give verbal descriptions of it, right? You can you cannot like just click a picture of every habit of your participant, right? So it's okay if you give verbal descriptions about that as well. And the researcher's analysis of the descriptions is very important because um, one is that you say okay, they remove their footwear and then work, they make their paintings, but why? The people are interested to know why. And therefore you say that since uh, Beals considered these paintings as very sacred, they think that through paintings they are actually connecting themselves to God. Therefore, they, for the sacred reasons, for religious purposes, they keep their footwear differently or away from themselves while they are working. So the visual evidence is important, the verbal descriptions are important, and also the reasons of those verbal descriptions and the of the visual evidences are also important. Now, there is this idea in the concept of cinematography which they call cheating. Uh, Cheating here actually means is that uh, when you are present somewhere, right? When you are on the film set, you see the whole set. You see what is, there behind the camera as well. But in when you're looking through the camera, you see till that much whatever is available through the lens, through the camera lens, right? So that is called the practice of cheating, where the cinematographer is actually cheating the audience to assume that only that much is present in the field. So it's a word generally used in parlance to describe fitting various lens views with the actions of actors and where the crew and equipment have to be. So basically, what you don't see is what is behind the lens. So this process makes you assume that what you see is actually that much present in the context. So it is rarely described in books properly, yet it is an essential skill in cinematography and increases exponentially with more complicated films and set logistics. So yeah, because when the films become complicated, like complicated in the sense when you have films like where you have to use the green screen, then you're actually doing the cheating. You're not showing that it is a screen and not a particular environment that the screen is showing. So these things become this process is basically making the audience see what you want them to see, right? So therefore it is called cheating. But there are various ways in which you can track cheating, is that you can take photographs and filming the crew. You can capture everything that is present behind the camera. So you do that, you track cheating. And then you can make diagrams and note specific incidents. So if you are not allowed to take pictures, what do? You can make drawings of what is happening behind the screen, right? And also you can like write things down. You can um, talk about specific things in the writing, um, and talk about certain instances that are happening behind the camera, and then discussing these with participants. So yeah, matlab, you can actually discuss how a particular part of the film is actually um, trying to make the audience believe that that particular thing is happening in real life, right? So you can just discuss about this with the participants as well. But coming and moving ahead from cinematography and all of those things, it is very important to understand another aspect of ethnography. So one was visual ethnography, and next comes in is sensory ethnography. The sensorial nature of ethnography says that you have to be very sensitive about every senses of your participants and of yourself as well. So whatever you can see in the field, hear in the field, smell in the field, touch in the field, you actually describe everything, right? And you try to make meaning out of every senses that you feel there. So if you hear about something, so like if you are in the field and you hear about uh, some animals roaring at a distance, then you understand that the context is close to a forest, and then you describe that, okay, the how do you get to know that the your participants live close to forest is through the sounds of the wild animals. Then again, uh, things like taste and smell can also be just described in writings, or maybe it can be just shown through visuals, like in movies. How do you know that a particular, like if there is a scene of rain pouring, you feel that sort of humidity in yourself when you see that, right? You get that sense of smell of the mud uh, while you're watching the film, and that all of this is very uh, all of this comes only when you are describing the events very well. So these senses should be communicated to your audience, and that is the main idea. So things you're observing that cannot necessarily be written down, or have to be recorded or found out about a different way. So basically, when you cannot just write down about things, when you're reading something, you won't be able to get that sort of experience of, sound and taste and smell, but and touch even. But like, there's a very nice example in this week 7, in which it shows a child at a barber's shop, or maybe it's a barber's chair in a school setting. So it shows how he's giving a haircut to that child, and then through that you can actually understand and sort of get an idea of what sort of touch he might be feeling while getting that haircut, because of the sound that you hear from the video, right? So these things are very important to be conveyed, to grasp that attention of your audience. And also uh, these this essence of touch and sound will help you to communicate your uh, learnings from the field very well. So, yeah, this sensorial aspect of ethnography is very important. Uh, and I think it only comes with experience. How do you communicate these sensorial aspects? Um, it is very difficult to accommodate the sensorial aspect into your films, obviously. So, the basic understanding here is that ethnography foregrounds narratives of individuals and groups. Uh, yeah, and when we are talking about ethnography, we are talking about narratives of your participants. Um, then looks at on ground experiences. Obviously, ethnography is majorly about what is present on ground. It also not just includes the experiences of your participants, but also your experiences. And thus, it lends nuanced material evidence for phenomena that may otherwise be painted in broad strokes. What really here means is, you actually put into a lot of effort talking about the little nuances that you see in the phenomena that you observe basically on the field, because this that is what you're interested in. You're not interested into the broad aspects and the broad you know in the thin description that I had talked about in the first session. You're not interested in the thin description of what all is happening. You are very much focused on the details of the phenomena that is happening. So that comes only in the thick description of what you see in the field. So for this, more and more researchers are actually undertaking visual ethnography in their own context. So for different ethnographers, for different researchers, visual ethnography is something different. They deploy it in different ways, they deploy it in different methods, and they create a sort of um, a whole meaning of their research through visual ethnography in their own ways. So, as I already said, that research is basically something that is very subjective. So, every type of research, be it ethnography, visual ethnography, and anything, will be very subjective. So, Subjectivity here means that every researcher will have their own ways to tell or explain things. Now, what we say here as is also that visuals that we see in the ground also can be considered as participants. So, what we were talking about right now was that when we're in the field, we have participants and we have visuals, right? But here we consider visuals as participants. Like how much interested you are to talk to participants, you should be interested enough to talk to visuals as well. And this means that you try to understand them well enough, like you understand your participants. So like you read the stories that a visual and an image tells, so you try to understand what story that image or visual is trying to tell you, right? That is very important. You consider like for example, in interviews you try to make meaning out of what your participants are saying, and in visuals you try to again make meaning of what the visual or the image is trying to tell you. So that is one thing. Then understanding the image context is very important. As you understand the context of your participants, you also try to understand the context of the image. So if you have an image of you know some group of painters talking and not working, not painting, then you say that then you have that context in mind that these painters sometimes also need some recreational time for themselves so that they can work even more productively when they come back to painting. So that context is again very important. Finally, through the visuals, we try to learn about the environment in which they exist. So the environment when we are talking about here is the context again. So the context of the image, where it was clicked, at what time of the day it was clicked, what the people were doing when it was clicked, all of these matter a lot. So it's only through these visuals that we capture, we try to understand the environment that we are talking about, right? So this study of like Bhil paintings I have been talking about a lot. It says that uh, Nina Sabnani ma'am actually talks about it in detail and say that while understanding about Bhil painting, she found out that there is a whole history related to Bhil paintings, and the you know painters have had a long history of social economic discrimination, right? So that you see through the history that they talk about, and they tell you about the way in which the so initially the Bhil paintings were done on walls. So after a certain point in time, this art of theirs, the paintings, were actually um, sort of getting um, you know redundant. They were not appreciated enough, and therefore people were not making any more paintings. So the Swaminathan led revolution, actually he suggested them that you the paint when like he was studying about the paintings and what is actually making the painters stop painting, so that he got to know that the painters were actually being moved away from their homes. They were forced to leave their homes and live into other areas of urbanized places. So therefore, they could not continue their art of painting because obviously there was no space on walls now. So he suggested that they would now they should now move from paintings on walls to paintings on paper. So when they did that, the whole thing about Bhil paintings changed, because now they would have to make smaller paintings so that it could fit on paper, and then they had to use different sort of colors, because the color that you use on a wall would be very different on the from the color that would you use on paper, right? So everything kept changing, and they started selling their paintings on paper. Like they created the paintings on paper and then started selling them for making a living. So these visuals of paintings are actually now participants who have got their own whole stories in the background. So that is what is important to see. The important aspects of a visual is basically that you draw connections between the visual and its context, that I already said. Uh, a painting, being a bheel painting, is important because, and otherwise, a normal painting would not have told so much about itself, as we learned. And the again it's about learning about the larger social, cultural, and so economic structures in which the visual exists. So the context, basically the context's socio-cultural and economic structure is important to know. So what is the um, ways in which these paintings are done, what is the cultural aspect, why do the painters make it, and then what is the economic value of these paintings is all important. And then the unraveling meanings of this different of individual participants, that the meaning that they associate with these visuals is very important. So as I said, Beals actually have a very different notion of these paintings than the consumer who's actually buying it from them. The consumer just buys it for its aesthetic purpose, but Beals have their own sacred meanings, uh, with associated with the paintings. Now, there are some ways in which you can read a visual. I'll just cover a few more things, and then we can see if you have any questions. So, there are three ways in which you can read a visual. Now, we have come to how do you understand, or how do you sort of study a visual, which is one on its own. So, like in wheel paintings, it was seen that the nature, when they were painting things of natural context, like when they were painting mountains, when they were painting trees, when they were painting rivers, they had their own natural aspect. So they did not put any imagination into it. However they looked, they would paint it as it is, right? But when it comes to painting humans, they had very abstract ideas about it. So they would not paint humans as they would look normally, like as you and me would look, but they would paint humans into very different forms. So this idea of um, putting focus on a very on the very minute details of the visual itself is reading a visual on its own. And then you can read the visual in conjunction with other visuals, so you can see that how different sort of paintings are made in different contexts. So you can study one painting with respect to another. Also you can study in conjunction with other forms of expression. So this can be sensorial connection. So like for example, you can see that paintings is one form of expression, while in this example of coward storytellers, so they painted the coward first and then they uh, went to houses to narrate stories. So that is the other form of expression. So there you can see that how one visual, that is the coward, can be used in different ways. Also, when you're making a film, you can actually say that it's not just the visual aspect of the film that is important. You are actually also taking into account the sound in the film used, and then you'd want to try to get that feeling of touch through that movie again. So these are the different ways in which you can study a visual. Now there is an example of Christopher Penny. He is a uh, anthropologist and ethnographer, obviously. So he's a very famous one, and his this his example has been used extensively in the videos. So this particular example say that he was very interested to learn about the poster making tradition of the central India, right? While uh, so it was basically between 1800s and 1900s. So in that century, he was very interested to see how the pictures of gods were painted on posters. So these were called chromolithographs. The posters are actually called chromolithographs, and these were actually the days of early printing in British India, obviously. So he was very interested to study about that, and he would see that these chromolithographs were actually sort of ways in which a narrative of national consciousness was spread. So, like during the 1957, basically, uh, these paintings were actually there to to spread that awareness of national consciousness, basically. We know that in 1857 there wasn't that sort of national consciousness present, but maybe if we talk about later, we could see that the pictures of gods were, sort of seen as something as our own. Then it would represent the god, like the Bharat Mata concept would be there, and they would represent India as a country, right? So he was very interested to see that. He read again the posters in two levels. First, he saw that how these images, like what were these images first. So these images would be like about some deity, like for example goddess Kali, and there might be a land of laborers who will be working, and then she might be blessing them, right? So he would see that what all is present in the image. First level is that, and second level is that through different forms of visual expression such as theater, paintings, and prints. So he would also see that how what all these posters actually might be influenced from. So he found out that these posters are influenced from a lot from the theater that was happening in that point of time. So the form and style of representing gods in these images made them objects of worship, basically. And Calcutta Art Studio was the actually, organization who was actually producing these posters. So uh, this form and style, he studied that a lot, and then he found out that the deities of that we worship basically in India represented in a manner were represented in these posters in a manner that invoked the notion of darshan, of seeing and being seen by a deity. So basically what happens is that as you see a deity in a mandir, you would see that in the poster. So the similarity that is present will that had eventually produced the idea that the posters are very pious and they should be worshipped. So the idea of worshipping gods through posters came here, and this is basically because uh, there were form and structure. So basically, the deity would be present at the center of the poster, like it is present in the center of the mandir. Then it would be, adorned with jewelry, and it will be painted with a lot of embellished and sparkly uh, things. So that you would see in a mandir, that they are adorned with a lot of jewelry and a very nice clothes and things like that. And also the major aspect was that in the posters as well, the deities would be looking straight into the eyes of the um, people. So that aspect would give them the idea that the deity is looking at you. Whatever you're doing, they're looking at you. So the poster also gave that sort of notion of a darshan when the people when people actually bought these posters, and therefore they started worshipping these posters. So yeah, but then he tried to understand that how these paintings are actually influenced. So he found out that these chromolithographs were very influenced from theater. So since that, at that point of time, the theater was actually a lot into, a lot in lot famous in Calcutta, and at the same time chromolithography was coming up. So he saw that the the way in which the gods were represented in theaters, it was also printed on paper. So it, he sort of found out a resemblance there, and so there are these two examples which are given in the video. They call about Girish Chandra Ghosh's Ravan Badh. This is a play, and this is sort of a painting basically, a chromolithograph, which actually shows that the final sequence of Lord Ram killing Ravan. So there, the Ravan Badh is totally influenced by the way in which Ramayana is actually put into theaters, right? So it would show that the background would be very dark, and it would show uh, a red background sort of, which shows that the Ravan's end is near, and the way the other soldiers are placed in the context will eventually be very similar to what is displayed in a theater. And the Nal and Damayanti, uh, what do we say, picture also would show a similar sort of a resemblance with the play. So whenever the Nal and Damayanti play would happen, it would show the background would be of the forest, and they would show sort of sorrow in the painting, because that is what the colors, uh, you know the idea of sorrow to be displayed in nature, which might be dusk, a bit of dusk, and a bit of uh, what do we say, sort of drooping trees and things like that, would be shown in the picture of in the painting of Nal and Damayanti, as it would show in a theater. So here, Christopher Pinney would suggest a lot of things, and he says that visuals are not just nude pictures; they have their own meaning. Then they seem to exercise a certain agency, a power over their creators and viewers, and therefore he would call them power of images. So he says that the images that the creators make, and also the um way in which viewers see the images, they have a lot of impact on both the creator as well as the viewers. It would He would also say that the images that you see influence the way you think. So that is what um, Christopher Penny is majorly talking about, that images are not just something that you would create, it would sort of have a power on you. So it's the other way around. And images are obviously invested with meaning by those who make, disseminate, and consume them. So obviously it's not just the creators, it's not the painter who actually produces meaning in the image. It's also the consumer of the image, or the person who sees the image, would also put a very different meaning into it. He would also assume some very different meaning of it, based on his understanding, his experiences, and all of that. So the way you look at pictures and the way I look at pictures will be very different, and that will all depend upon how we how we perceive things around us. And looking at a picture, you will have a very different meaning of it. You will find a very different meaning of it, and I will have a very different meaning of it. Also, that image will produce a very sort of what do we say, a sort of power on you as well as on me, which will eventually make you look at it in a different manner, and look at me and me to look at it in a different manner. right? So yeah, this is up for today. If you have any doubts with respect to whatever we have discussed right now, you can ask me, Devashish. Otherwise, we can continue with the next session next.
Yes, ma'am. All things are clear.
Yeah, can you repeat? I couldn't hear you. Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah. Now you're audible.
All things clear, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Cool. So, we will be next meeting on next Monday. So that the 7 to 9 p.m. time will be there, and we'll be discussing. We might be just finishing off with the week 7, and we might just start off with week 8 there. And whatever doubts you might have through all the sessions that you have gone through, you can ask me in the next session and in the next to next session. So we're just left with 2 more sessions. Make sure that you attend it and you ask your doubts.
Yes, ma'am. I have another question. Is
Mm-hmm.
ma'am, as a engineering student, how can I apply ethnography in my field?
Um, so basically, if you are doing a research, for example, and you are basically interested. So like I really don't know like what your field is in engineering, what you uh, like maybe want to learn about. So, for example, if you are interested to know the plight of certain engineers while they are at work. So, for example, you you have a friend who says that being an engineer, I am very overworked, right? And you want to know that uh, what all makes your friend overworked, and if there are any more people who are undergoing the same thing, right? So what you would do is you might just go to your friend, their colleagues, and spend some time with them every day and see how they work, right? You would see how the work culture in their office is, right? And you would see what all is present in their office. Is there any sort of a hierarchy that is putting pressure on him? Is there any is there a process that the office is going through which is problematic, like they might be just there might be no there might be just no rules on working hours. So that can be a very different thing, and then all of these things you will have to go and see in his office setting, right? So, even such a study of you going to an office setting and looking at how employees are being suppressed, or you know, they are being sort of, what do we say, the way in which they are overworked, right? You are going you try to consider all those factors, you try to study all those factors, and then then write about it. Then that is sort of again an ethnographic study. So basically the context is important. The context is the office. Your participants are important. Your participants are the employees, the engineers, right? So uh, things like these, when you're interested in certain type of people, certain community of people, and you'd want to find answers that how they are working every day, what all different things of their office are actually making sort of their lives problematic. Then you can use these ethnographic research points into your study. Did that make sense to you, Devashish?
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're audible.
Uh, yes, ma'am. It is clear. Ma'am, another thing I ask: are you are in any research field now? You are working on the ethnographic research.
Yeah, I am a PhD scholar. So I'm a researcher. I'm a full-time researcher right now.
So, ma'am, what is your
I couldn't hear you. Sorry. Um, couldn't hear you. Sorry, Debashish. Please come again. Or
yes, ma'am.
maybe you can type in the chat box if you feel like.
Yes, ma'am. What is your means on which field you are going to research now? Means what is your research topic on something, ma'am?
Oh, right now, so I am from IDC School of Design, and this is my like first year of PhD here. So right now, it isn't very clear what I'll be working on, but it will be basically in game design, and that educational games, mathematical games, majorly.
Understand, ma'am. And can I get a chance, or in future, if I explore this field as a engineering student in the internship or any means in summer internship, can I get the chance to explore this field as a internship?
This field, you mean research?
Means how ethnography research is actually going on.
Yeah, sure. So if you really want to do some sort of research, you can apply for research associate positions. You can, or maybe like a research intern position. Sorry. Also, you can, associate yourselves in various research projects that are happening in different institutes. You can surely do that.
So in my during my this summer internship program, can I apply for that also?
Yes, yes. If you find some topics, some research topics, some research projects that you're interested in, you can surely apply. Did that answer your question, Devashish?
Yes, ma'am. It is clear.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, do you have any more questions?
No, ma'am. No.
Okay, great then. So we can just finish this session today and start off our discussion further about visual ethnography in like on Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. again, and we can talk further about whatever is left from week 7. Thank you so much for joining, Devashish. It was a great time talking to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good night, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Good night.